The United Nations is changing the way it helps countries in need. President Obama made the announcement at an anti-poverty summit at the United Nations yesterday. The president outlined how the U.S. will spend development dollars and noted that nations that commit to democracy will be favored.
Let's commit to the same transparency that we expect from others. Let's move beyond the old narrow debate over how much money we're spending, and instead let's focus on results, whether we're actually making improvements in people's lives.
The president addresses the UN General Assembly today. Pamela Falk, CBS News foreign affairs analyst, joins us now with that and more. Pamela, good morning to you.
Good morning, Terrell.
President was a rock star last year. What a difference a year makes.
He was, and it is a big difference. He had one unique message, and that was non-proliferation. And he conveyed it both in the General Assembly speech last year, and in the Security Council. This year, he's got a lot of themes. He's got the Middle East peace process he's trying to promote. He's got nuclear non-proliferation. And now he's unveiled this new foreign aid program. It's a little diffuse, and so it's a tough time in the U.S. economy and in the U.S. elections. So it's a little bit harder to get the point across.
Still pretty amazing here, ironic to a certain extent, that at an anti-poverty summit, the president's still pledging foreign aid to countries that are overseas, and poverty in this country is at one of the highest levels that it's ever been before. Can the U.S. afford to be that go-to country even in times like this?
Probably not. In other words, what he did was remarkably unilateral for a president who's saying he's somewhat multilateral. In other words, he's unveiling a U.S. aid program it had all these benchmarks that were good, accountability, and it had development, not just helping countries become dependent on the United States. But he has to look back and say, wait a minute, why not go through the United Nations? And also, why not reflect something? Instead of saying it's just not charity, why not talk about the fact that the United States has poverty at record levels? And the UN Foundation, curiously, if you look at those two together, the UN Foundation was saying the United States is now, what they're doing with all this Bill Gates money and Ted Turner money is taking American poverty children and pairing them with foreign poverty children. I mean, in other words, if you're going to just roll out a new foreign aid approach, talk about the United States problems too. And I think he missed that trick.
Today is the president's main speech to the General Assembly. What are we going to hear today?
Today we're going to hear a lot about non-proliferation. I think he's going to try to keep the world on board to make sure that both Iran and North Korea are shunned for their defiance of the non-proliferation treaty. But he's got a tough road on that one, too. There are a lot of Arab states that are looking for nuclear energy, which is what Iran says it's doing. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Jordan. And so he's going to have to make a point that they're in defiance of the UN, yet Ahmadinejad sort of got the jump. The Iranian president got the jump on world attention by coming in Sunday and saying we're offering talks.
And getting a head start and really being in front of the media. Let's talk about the Iranian president, President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He said that capitalism is facing defeat and that the future belongs to Iran. Strong words.
Very strong words, and somewhat ominous. The future belongs to Iran, and Iran wants to be considered a big power by the United States, is what he said. And that's a theme he did echo last year, which is they want a seat on the Security Council, they want to be seated at the adult table. But the future belongs to Iran almost implied some kind of leverage, and the way the West reads that is a nuclear weapon. The capitalism is on its way down, seems totally out of touch.
The U.S. government, by the way, has painted this picture of Ahmadinejad to the American people and about Iran. What does the rest of the world think about that president?
The rest of the world has voted, by the way, to shun Iran, to impose sanctions. They see him as being only anti-Israel, calling the names he calls, threatening countries, and they don't want those kind of relations. Most of the Arab world has come around to having better trade relations. They don't need this kind of shenanigans and really mixing and meddling in other countries' affairs. In other words, they're helping Hezbollah in Lebanon, they're helping Hamas against Israel in the Palestinian territories, and the rest of the world doesn't want it. On the other hand, he says things that the Arab world likes to hear. In other words, why shouldn't we be considered big power in this day and age? I mean, how does the UN Security Council have 5 states that were big in 1945? So it's a mixed message, and I think President Obama didn't come with the leadership that the world is looking for, as he did last year.
So let's keep on that Iran theme for a second. So we go 20 years, 50 years, decades down the line. What's the U.S. relationship with this country going to be like?
Well, if Iran changed regimes, if Ahmadinejad weren't there, I think it would be a great relationship, and it could move into a relationship. The protests that you'll see, by the way, when Ahmadinejad speaks, which is on the same day as President Obama in the afternoon, are against the kind of brutal crackdown that he has imposed on the country and his government and the Ayatollahs as well, because of this disputed election. In other words, there is no opposition as far as he's concerned in Iran itself. And so I think it's very hard to see a future of an Iran with better relations with any of the countries of the world, not to mention the West, when the regime is not legitimate. And so that's the biggest problem. The other problem that Israel has and the United States has is if they keep letting him play the clock and develop a nuclear weapon, then everyone's in a bit of trouble, because that kind of leverage in the Middle East and in the region will be very tough and very threatening.
And the eyes of the world will certainly be watching over these next couple of days. CBS News Foreign Affairs analyst Pamela Falk, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, Terrell.